And let's go. All right, welcome everybody. It's Wednesday, September 7th, 2022. My name's Andrew Farago. I'm the curator of the Cartoon Art Museum, and it's my pleasure and privilege to be conducting this Toon Talk, part of Cartoon Art Museum's regular speaker series. Sometimes we do these in person, sometimes we do these online. So we're very, I'm thrilled. I'm a longtime fan, and I'm very pleased to welcome Colleen Doran here for a Toon Talk on Chivalry, her latest graphic novel. Copy right here. Showing up backward on the screen, but hope you all have your copies close at hand. So I'm going to do a quick introduction here, and you can chime in, correct me if I get anything incorrect, but Colleen is a cartoonist illustrator whose recent adaptation of Neil Gaiman's short story Snow Glass Apples received the Bram Stoker Award for Superior Achievement in a Graphic Novel and the Eisner Award for Best Adaptation from Another Medium. Her work also appeared in Gaiman's Sandman and his American Gods graphic novel, as well as the New York Times bestselling adaptation of his story Trollbridge. Doran created the artwork for Stan Lee's best-selling graphic novel autobiography, Amazing, Fantastic, Incredible Stan Lee. She also contributed to Morrison Hotel, a graphic novel featuring the music and life stories of the legendary rock band The Doors. Doran was the artist in residence at the Smithsonian Institution, lectured at the Maryland Institute College of Art and Design, the Australian Society of Authors, and has exhibited and lectured in galleries, museums, and exhibits around the world. Books featuring her work have received Eisner Awards, the International Horror Guild Award, and Harvey Awards. She's also a sometimes participant in the NASA Social Media Correspondent Project. And I also want to mention her work right now is on display at the Cartoon Art Museum through September 18th. So if you have not seen her artwork for Chivalry, you've still got another week and a half to make it over there. And if you don't make it here to San Francisco, you'll have an opportunity soon to see it on the East Coast in an exhibition at the Society of Illustrators in New York. So we'll talk more about that as we go. But if I had an audience in front of me, I'd ask everybody to give you a warm round of applause, but I'll encourage everybody to do that at home. So welcome.
Hi.
Hi. So you're broadcasting from your studio.
Yeah, this is it. This is my digs. It's let me see if I can get you a little view of the place. Here we go. Looking around my joint. This is my ubiquitous salt lamps. I've got them all over the place. And ooh, how do I get that thing back over here? There's the painting station. Painting goes on over there. That's a Donato oil painting above my painting station. It's some of the only original art I have, but it was just so gorgeous. I loved it. In fact, it reminded me of Sir Galahad. That's why I bought that piece. And there's my computer, my graphics computer. That computer, by the way, is about 14 years old and it's still going. My scanner and all kinds of stuff that I've set aside to show you this evening over here on the side table. And I can't show you this drawing board here because it's got stuff that hasn't been announced yet on it. I'll get in trouble. So
great. So yeah, hopefully we'll do a little show and tell as we go.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, I think we can actually kick things off with Chivalry, and
yay.
It's such a fun story, such an amazing story, and you actually got an earlier look at it than almost anybody else, right?
Yeah. When Neil started out in comics, he really wasn't doing much with prose. He didn't have much prose fiction published, and he would send his friends copies of stories he was working on via fax, and sometimes something would just come spurting out via the fax machine at 1 o'clock in the morning from England. And that story came out and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the most beautiful story. I really want to adapt this someday. And unfortunately, it was caught up in a movie rights debacle. Something about the contract negotiations tied up the graphic novel rights literally for decades. And in the irony of all ironies, the Me Too movement ended up bringing down that producer, and his studio went under and the rights were returned. So that's why I was able to do Chivalry, which is horrible story. It's horrible. I'm laughing because it's kind of embarrassing and horrible, but that's what happened. They couldn't get the rights back from the guy, and the production company had to go under to get the rights back.
Okay, I'm glad some good came out of it. But
I'm sure a lot of good came out of it, but that was just a weird thing to have happen. Poor Sir Galahad was being held hostage by by a nefarious evildoer. It was just really strange.
But did you have first dibs on it? Did you let him know right away that if anybody was going to draw this, that this was you?
I've begged for years. I've begged off and on for years. I know other people wanted it, and there are a couple of people who are not talking to me right now because they wanted it really, really badly. But I would occasionally prod him. I would send him sketches. I would say, this is the style I have in mind. This is how I want to approach it. And he would go, we're trying to get the rights back. And that's pretty much what I would say. But I know there were other people that wanted it very, very badly. But I think Neil said something about how after Snow Glass Apples, he's like, you nailed it. You get it. And I was like, yay. So that made me very happy. I wanted to do this story more than anything I've ever wanted to do in my whole career. I was sick at the thought of not getting it, especially, I'm not going to say who wanted it, but there were some other artists who really wanted it, who were, stratospherically good. And at one point I thought maybe I won't get it. And I was actually sick and crying about it. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I was that upset. I was that wrapped up in doing the story someday. And I thought, oh, I'm not good enough. I won't get it. And then I got it. And then I was so happy. Yay. And but you just fall in love with the stories. You just get they just mean so much, and you want to do them justice, and you want, and I had such a clear idea of how these people looked, and I really felt like I could honor the story in ways that I didn't think other people who wanted the job would do. I think they would make it about their art and not about what was best for the tale. That was just my opinion. I'm sure they think the same thing, like they probably want to hit me with a brick, but but I really felt like the approach I had was an approach that honored the story.
And so it's safe to say your relationship with the Legend of King Arthur, that goes way back. You've been a fan reader for a long time. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Ever since I was a little girl. I mean, certainly I love Prince Valiant, which I didn't mention in the afterword, and I don't know why I didn't mention it, because that was a big part of it. I started reading the Prince Valiant strips in the newspaper, and when I was a little girl, they were already phasing out some of the major adventure strips from the newspaper, and strips had already started to get smaller and smaller. But when I saw the art in Prince Valiant, I said, oh, this is the kind of stuff I want to do. This is beautiful. And I think it was being drawn by John Colin Murphy at the time. And we couldn't get the newspaper very often. I know that sounds ridiculous, but we didn't get it very often on Sunday. And whenever I got it, I would clip it out of the newspaper and save it. And I would save it in a special box. And when I was about, I don't know how old I was, but I was pretty young, scholastic book shows, those book fairs that we go to schools. The first books, I believe, that I ever bought with my own money were those storybooks, those Prince Valiant storybooks that came out in the 1970s. And I bought all of those. And I still have my copies. They're falling apart. You know, the covers are coming off and everything. And it was because of Prince Valiant, really, that I wanted to read the original Legends. And the first versions I read were by Howard Pyle. He's a legendary illustrator, but he was also a writer. He wrote a number of books about the books that took place in the Middle Ages, like Men of Iron, which was adapted into the film The Black Shield of Falworth, starring Tony Curtis, of all people. That's where that line, "Yonder lies the castle of my father," comes from. You ever see that as a meme or anything? It's
Yeah.
Tony Curtis trying to be English.
Okay.
"Yonder lies the castle of my father." Oh my gosh, that's based on the Howard Pyle novel Men of Iron. It's trivia night at the Comic Art Museum. I love that movie. It's so ridiculous. But the book is beautiful, so beautifully written, so beautifully illustrated. I actually think it's some of the peak of his black and white illustration. It's just stupendous. And he did 4 volumes of the King Arthur Legends, with the first 3 being outstanding. Unfortunately, the Holy Grail is not as good, but I just worshiped the ground Howard Pyle walked on, and I read, and then I got Le Morte d'Arthur, which was, probably over my head when I was about 10, but I dug in and I was like, I'm going to do whatever I have to do to understand this massive thing. So then, anything King Arthur book, my parents would buy me. And I remember one year for Christmas, they bought me Thomas Berger's Arturus Rex, which is not for children. So I'm sitting here reading it going, what? It was so wrong. It was disillusioning. And Sir Galahad was tubercular and just fainting. It was the weirdest book. But anyway, I was on a mission to read everything you could read about King Arthur. I collected every book that came out, and I eventually just got overwhelmed with my King Arthur collection. I finally sold off most of it, but I'm still very interested in the core legends, and I never get tired of it. I just never do. I'm always disappointed that there's never been a movie or a TV show that really grabs what's in my head. So maybe someday.
Well, yeah, I love it when an artist is able to connect with a work like that means that much to them, as for such a long period of time. And I should mention that's a good reminder. I need to get some exhibition photos, because we've got a beautiful Prince Valiant page from our permanent collection on display next to your artwork, and that's just such a. I love when we're able to do that. When we're able to take artists.
That gets me where I live. I need a fan. I need. It's just so great. Oh wow, that's nice. Thank you. Get me a picture, please.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't know. Yeah, you've probably seen. I hope you've seen some Foster originals, but those are giant. They're poster sized. And
the first time I saw Foster original was in 1989 at Mort Walker's house. He had this beautiful house in Connecticut, and it was glorious. It was art heaven. He had Remington and a huge Hal Foster on the walls. He had a Remington sculpture, and he had just all these beautiful golden age illustrations around his place. He had such magnificent taste, and his studio was the best. It was his house overlooked this beautiful roaring stream. It was just gorgeous. And I never forget seeing my first Howard Pyle originals. It was almost as big as I am tall. I couldn't believe it. It's like, wow, it's legendary art for a legendary story. It was the best.
Yeah, and I think yeah, if I'm not mistaken, there are actually quite a few comic strip artists over there in Connecticut, right by Mort Walker. So John Cullen Murphy was actually, I mean, there's just a whole enclave of legendary comic strip artists right there. And it's yeah, it's so cool to hear that about the field trip to Mort's house.
I can't remember the title off the top of my head. I think it might be Cartoonist Country, but it's written by John Cullen Murphy's son.
Mhm.
You know that book?
Yes, yeah.
And it's wonderful. It's all these fantastic stories about the golden age of strip comics and this wonderful community they had up there and how everybody knew everybody. And it's just full of these wonderful anecdotes. You have got to get this book. It's just fantastic. It thrilled me reading this story and thinking of all these wonderful artists who knew each other and had coffee and hung out together and traded stories. It's just the best. You got to get that book. You got to get that book.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, actually, that prompted a question. So J. Kevin Carrier on our chat wanted to know, what's the largest piece of artwork that you have ever created?
Ooh, you know what? It's actually a King Arthur piece. It's out in storage somewhere. When I was a teenager, because anytime I could sneak King Arthur into my assignments, I would. So I was in an English class, and so when they said, pick a legend, a legend and write a paper, naturally, I picked King Arthur, and every presentation works better with graphics. So I got this enormous poster board, and on it, I did my own versions of Howard Pyle, not Howard Pyle, Hal Foster, Prince Valiant drawings. But I also got these ads from these 1970s era DC Comics. Nestor Redondo was in line to do an adaptation of King Arthur, and I think that was with Jerry Conway.
Mhm.
And you saw all these beautiful ads with this fantastic artwork in them. The books never came out. I spent years looking for this book only to find out it was never released, but the art was glorious. So one of the largest pieces is about the size of a Hal Foster original. It's this enormous poster board thing where I was doing, copies of Nestor Redondo and Hal Foster at a big round table in the middle of the picture, and that's probably the biggest thing I've ever done. No, I did some murals. Yeah, you know what? I'd forgotten about this. I used to paint sets. I did some set design and did some sets. So I guess that's technically my largest stuff. But I don't even have any pictures of it. I don't know what happened to that stuff. They probably painted over it next season. That would be my largest. But yeah, back when I was a teenager, I was ambitious. Good Lord.
We're glad you were. And have you held on to most of these pieces, most of your teenage art, or?
I have some of it. I know one of the pieces I did when I was in high school is out in storage, probably getting mold and mildew. I didn't throw away a lot. If it wasn't damaged in a fire, I had some stuff that was damaged in a fire and some stuff that was damaged in a flood. I kept it. I don't even throw away the stuff I was doing when I was a kid. I've got all the preliminary art I did for A Distant Soil and all my early comic book art when I was the Legion of Superheroes fan and stuff. It's all still around here.
Great. So I don't know if the mic is picking up the ice cream truck in the background. I muted myself for a second there, but yeah, yeah. As I said before we started recording, it's a very hot week in California, so I'm sure the ice cream truck is doing great business this week. Yeah. So backtracking a little bit. So you got an early look at Chivalry. When it was just a prose story that Neil had written. And can you talk about the earliest work I know of that you did with Neil was Sandman #20, the Element Girl story facade. Is is that your earliest work with
Mhm.
him? And is that what led to that? What led to that first collaboration?
This is a really odd story, but this is like got to be one of the weirdest stories in comics. Um, the United States government introduced me to Neil Gaiman, and that I know, yeah, weird, huh? The United States government. Back in 1989, there was an organization called the United States Information Agency. I don't even think they're still around anymore. And they were basically a think tank and a unit that was supposed to, try to promote the United States interests and uh, to, and the Delphi Institute was the was the cultural, intellectual think tank part of the United States Information Agency. So out of the blue, I get a notice from them saying that they had picked me to be an American representative for an international pop culture exchange. And they picked artists from India and Pakistan and Philippines and Czechoslovakia and all kinds of places. And they brought them all to the United States to study American pop culture. Now, let me just say that I was a bad choice. I really think I was a very bad choice. I was not in a good place at the time. I was really nervous, and somebody else wanted my slot very, very badly, and they became super upset and caused a big stink. And so I went into it just really nervous and tense, thinking, because I was, being told, well, you're only getting this slot because you're young and pretty and not because you're any good. And it was really tense and horrible. But I got it, and there it is. So one of the things they did was they went around to the different comic book companies, and it was all across the country. They went to New York and Washington, D.C. and Chicago and L.A. and just all kinds of places. And they stopped by the DC Comics offices. Well, I was already working there. It was 1989. I was already getting jobs on Wonder Woman and stuff. And while everybody is in the conference room hanging out, talking with Archie Goodwin and whatnot, I was like, well, I'm going to go get some work. So I snuck out and I head on down to Karen Berger's office. And I go in, and there's this good looking young man, and he's all decked out in black. And Karen introduces me, and I'm like, yeah, hi, how's it going? And he's like, oh, Colleen, I'm so happy to meet you. I'm a big fan of A Distant Soil. And I'm like, oh, well, great, okay. And I go out the door and I get halfway down the hall and I went, wait a minute. I know who that guy is. And Sandman had just started coming out. There were only a few issues published, and it wasn't doing very well at the time. It actually almost got canceled. And but I was reading it and I thought it was brilliant. And I come running back to the office and I go, you're Neil Gaiman. I was like, you're Neil Gaiman, Sandman, you're Neil Gaiman. I love that book. It's like, oh, Colleen, I'm so happy to meet you. We have to work together. So that's how I met Neil Gaiman. And DC had just published that issue number 8 special, where they had the different interior page and introduction to death. And Neil and it wasn't in stores yet. They had just gotten the office copies, and Neil picked it up and he wrote down his name, address, and phone number. He says, oh, we must work on Sandman together, and handed me a copy. And that's how I got to work on Sandman. The United States government brought us together. Isn't that wonderful? Your tax dollars at work.
That's what we want our tax dollars to go for. I love hearing that. I hope when Neil tells that story, I hope he does a nice version of your accent that whatever.
Mine's pretty horrible.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's so funny when I think about it, because the whole point of the pop culture initiative was to promote American pop culture and to, expand it and blah, blah. And in a weird sort of way, I would not be doing what I'm doing now. I wouldn't have had these graphic novels come out. I wouldn't have worked on Sandman if the government hadn't made that introduction. Isn't that bizarre? It's so funny. So that's what happened. That's how I got introduced to Neil, and that's how he asked me to work on Sandman.
That's great. Yeah, I would have guessed, oh, it must have been a convention. It must have been some official DC thing. It was not any of that.
Nope. No. And everybody else stayed down in the office and got free sandwiches and stuff with Archie. And I went looking for work. I'm like, I already know this company. I don't need anything here. They took us to visit the Library of Congress. We got to go underground to the archives. They took us to visit the Tribune offices. We got to meet Jeff McNelly. They took us to the Cartoon Art Museum in Connecticut. Was it Rybrook?
Right.
And it was started by Mort Walker. They took us to his house. He was super nice guy. They took us to DC, Marvel, a couple of other places, and the Ohio Cartoon Art Festival at Ohio State, Ohio University. Can't remember, but they took us to that. So it was really fascinating, and I wish I'd been in a better place to be a better representative and appreciate it better. But looking back, I think, wow, that really made a huge difference in my life. That's extraordinary. Who saw that coming?
Comics are still around in the United States, so I guess you did your job. You did. you ambassadored properly.
Ambassador. I'm an ambassador.
Great. So yeah, so it sounds like the two of you hit it off. He wanted to work on a Sandman issue, and that led to more than one issue of Sandman. And then more recently, the two of you at Dark Horse did some collaborations. So you did the Troll Bridge. Did he reach out to you? Did he have you in mind for that one?
No. Here's what happened. I actually don't consider myself very important to Sandman at all. I mean, you do a couple of issues, but that's sort of like being a red shirt in Star Trek. I feel like I got very lucky, and Malcolm Jones did the most magnificent ink job ever. Oh my gosh, it's such a tragedy he's not with us anymore. He was so good. He was so kind. He gave me such confidence and whatnot. But my next issue with another inker was not well received, and I had started having weird health problems and stuff, so I became unreliable, and everybody was like, what's wrong with her, she's such a flake. It took me a lot of years to live down that reputation, and of course people are a lot more understanding and kinder now, and I wasn't as gracious to Karen Berger as I should have been, because I'm like, hey, she needs to cut me some slack, I'm sick all the time. But she's trying to do her job. She's got to hire people who can actually hit the mark. So I didn't get much more work at Vertigo for a long, long time. And Neil and I didn't work together for ages. He did give me the rights to adapt Troll Bridge for an issue of A Distant Soil. And I did a terrible job, just not good at all. I crammed it into little, I think, 8 pages, and tried to do it in a scritchy Sandman-y style, and didn't suit it at all. And I thought, man, I'm just not good enough to work on these stories I want to do. I'm just not good enough. And I just need to dig down and be a better artist. So fast forward to 2008, I think. And 2007, wow. And I was still having a lot of problems and still having, wrangling with my art. But I said, I'm really going to try something new on this job I'm doing for Tori Amos comic book tattoo. And I went in a completely new direction with my art, which I do occasionally. I just throw everything out and start all over, burn it to the ground, and okay, I'm going to do something else. And it was really well received. It did great. The editor was super happy, Rance Hosley, blah, blah. And I was at a show and I said, Neil, I've been thinking about how badly I feel about the job I did on Trollbridge, which was 10 years prior. 10 years I stewed about it, thinking, man, if I had another, yeah, I don't let shit go. Can I say that? I don't let stuff go. I really put thought and care into things. And when I don't think I've lived up to it, it bothers me. I'm not kidding. I don't let it go. I'm like, no, that's not right. It didn't honor the text. I didn't honor the privilege of getting to work on these beautiful stories. I need to do it again. I need another chance. And I showed this art to Neil and he was like, this is magnificent. And I said, great. I said, I would like another crack at Trollbridge. I think I could do it right. I think I could really do it right. And he said, yes, let's talk to Doc Coles. So we did. And that's how I reconnected with Neil. And they were very happy with the art on that. And then he said, oh, let's do, and Daniel Chaban, is that how you pronounce his name? Chaban? He's like, well, I'd like to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. He said, I'd like to see you do Snow Glass Apples. We'd like to give that a go. And I said, I need to do this in this style that I know Neil would love. He loves Harry Clark. And I said, I've admired Harry Clark since I was a girl. And one of the first King Arthur pieces I ever did was in Harry Clark's style. It was like when I was a teenager. And well, one of the earliest, not one of the first, but one of the earliest. And I said, Neil, here's me working in this style. How about we do this for Snow Glass Apples? And he said, oh, that's wonderful. So then we did that. And then I was like, okay, now here's what I want to do with Chivalry, which I had been bugging him since, for years at that point, someday I want to do this. And he's like, oh yes, let's do that. So that's how it all went. I didn't work with Neil for a really, really long time. And I just didn't think I was good enough. And I was like, I got to double down and be a better artist. That's it. That's so I did.
Well, something obviously worked because it looked like you leveled up everybody. Everybody responded well to it. I mean, they sold well. You got awards, so I think you mission accomplished.
I I think I'm just one of those artists that's not suited to the way the comic book industry is structured. Everything is about monthlies and cranking it out. And people were writing me off at one point. They're like, Colleen's never going to be able to survive in this industry, and she's too slow and she's too meticulous and she's too neurotic. And I said, I'm going to show you. I'm going to do books that are like the gift books of the golden age of illustration. I'm going to do books that people buy because they have to have the art too. So much of comic art these days is just pictures for words to hang on. Everything is visual shorthand. And the popular belief now is that if you spend a lot of time on the art, you cannot make it in comics. You just can't. And I said, I'm going to do books that people will wait for if they only get done at a page a week. That's what I'm going to do. And it worked. It really worked. So that's what I'm going to do on Neil's stuff. When I do Neil's books, I'm going to put the extra time in for the visuals. Now, it's not going to happen on every project, but when I get the chance to do, I think of them. Well, I was having a minor debate with another artist who was, kind of saying, well, fancy comic book art, it's like Fabergé eggs. They don't mean anything. And I'm like, no. Decoration, beauty, craftsmanship matter. when I go to the Virginia Museum of Fine Art, I go in to the Fabergé exhibit, and that's where I spend most of my time, dazzled by these jewels. And I said, I want to make these graphic novels that are little jewel books that you admire the way you admire a Fabergé egg. So there you go.
And I want to
Either I'm doing it or I'm not, but
I want to say, I would love to see this as a, one of those 1970s, treasury editions. It would be fun to see it at that size. But I'm very lucky that every day I get to go into work and I get to see the originals on the wall. I get to study those up close. And again, plugging the museum exhibition again. I hope people make it out there by September 18th to check it out up close and personal, because it's as great as printing technology has gotten. There are those little details that you get right up close that you just don't get in any printed edition, and that's such an exciting thing for me, seeing the.
you can't see the effect of the paint. When I talk to people about the paints I'm using, they don't really understand that the paints really have jewels in them. Some of the paints are made of ground amethyst. Some of the paints have different semi-precious stones in them. And when you get up on the painting, you'll see this iridescence to some of it. Some of it's no more than pretty mica flakes, but there are qualities to the paint that can't be printed, and they make me really happy. The first time I saw an illuminated manuscript in person was, I think it was about 1984, and I was at Rizzoli's in New York. It was I think it was my first trip to New York City, and they had this illuminated manuscript for sale in a glass case, and it was $3,000. And I thought it was the most beautiful thing I ever saw. It was just perfect. And I had $3,000. It was all the money I had in the world. I was like this close to buying that. It's a good thing I didn't, but I just thought this is the most perfectly beautiful thing I've ever seen. And when I go to museums, I look for the illuminated manuscripts. When I was in Dublin, what did I do? Where are the illuminated manuscripts? Where's the Book of Kells? And there was a whole museum near Trinity College where they're having this huge exhibit. Spent a whole day in there. I love them. I just think they're perfection. They make me so happy to think that somebody has this beautiful, beautiful thing in their hand, and it's this monument of craftsmanship, and this person sat down and stroke by stroke wrote every word with loving care. It's beautiful. I love them. They make me so happy.
My wife spent her junior year of college at Trinity, and she said she took full advantage of that. She looked at the Book of Kells every day, and I think about once a week they turned the page and you got to see a different one, and she was a fixture there. And that's where she discovered Harry Clarke's work as well. So that's yeah. But yeah, there's just something about seeing and I love seeing fine artists, but also comic artists, like seeing Dave McKean's work up close. You really can't, there's so much that you're not going to get from those cover reproductions that you're going to get from just being right there with the art. And anyway, I should segue into another question, but this was your first painted project in quite some time, right? Was that?
Yeah. The last time I tried to paint something for comics was in 1991. It was Anne Rice's The Master of Ripley Gate. It started out okay, but the pay was incredibly low. And uh, fully painted art for those prices is just crazy. And the deadline was crazy. It would have been like painting a page a day. It was just stupid. And people were like, meh. You know, some of the pages are good. Some of the pages are good, but it was just not tenable. Sold really well. Sold, gosh, I think it sold about 60,000 copies, which is pretty good for a graphic novel. But it was not very well received, and people were like, well, she can't paint. And I'm like, well, you know, if you're having to crank stuff out a page a day, I don't think anybody's a Michelangelo at that rate. But I said, next time I get a chance at this, I'm gonna really, really give it everything. So I did. So I don't recommend people go looking for the Master of Rampling Gate. That was actually my first painted project, and that was like 1991, I think.
Okay. And someone, Mikhail Latia, might be Latia. He wanted to know how you made this new model of work make fiscal sense. So like pacing yourself, knowing what you were budgeted per page, wanting to put your full effort for your full time into it, but still hitting that production schedule and making it work as it for a working artist.
There are several things going on. One, I have a Patreon. I'm not going to lie. You cannot make a living in comics on the page rate doing the work I'm doing. You can't do it. You'll starve. It's not even. Oh boy. If you were living in a city, you couldn't pay your rent. Let me put it that way. You just wouldn't even be able to pay basic rent. My Patreon actually does pretty well, and it sponsored a lot of this stuff. But my model comes from two things: make the art so that people want the original and are willing to pay a lot of money for the original. I honestly, that's part of it. I can literally make more money on a half a dozen pages of original art from one of these books than I can get paid for the book on page rate, like the whole book. So I know that when I sit down to do one, I'm not going to get anything up front from the publisher, really. It has to sell well enough to earn royalties, and Snow Glass Apples sold really well. My Patreon is there to eat up any shortfall. And then when I get the chance, when the book is out, I sell some originals, and that makes the difference. There is no money in comic book page rates unless you're, I don't know, Alex Ross or whatever. And I'm not getting the lowest rate or anything, but you cannot do a page or two a week like this and make a living on the page rate. It's not going to happen. You know, my agent gets a cut, you know, as well. And that's what pays for it. I tell my patrons all the time, I said, you guys paid for this. And they do. And there is no way I would have made it through the pandemic and everything else, with everything going crazy. And I got really sick. You know, the Patreon makes a difference. But the original art really makes a difference. The original art on Snow Glass Apples, I've sold almost all the pages from the entire book. And I'm kind of sad about it, because I'm like, crap, I'm not going to have very much left. But you know, you spend 4 days on a page for, you know, that kind of rate. So everything is about the back end on these books. And the hope is that the back end on the previous book helps to pay for the next one. And so Snow Glass Apples and the Patreon paid for Chivalry. And I just did a sale of some of the art for Chivalry, which paid for a lot of the shortfall at the end of Chivalry. And I immediately took the art back off the market because, you know, I want to save it for some of the upcoming shows. So a lot of that's been set aside for the future. So but hopefully Chivalry will then earn royalties as well. But the average artist out there, especially with the a lot of people doing digital and whatnot, they don't have that business model set up. I've had a number of digital artists go, how can you make that work? And I'm like, do you know what I'm getting for my originals? And they're like, oh, yeah. So like, I'm just finishing a painting. This is funny. I'm not going to say what this was. I just started a painting on a job that I started at the wrong aspect ratio. And so I've had to redo the whole piece digitally in one day, which has been super fun. And I'm almost finished. The time cost of doing art by hand is unbelievable compared to the time cost of doing art digitally, but you don't have the original. And you've got to balance the loss of the income from the original art against the long-term value of the job, which sounds very mercenary, but this is what artists do for a living. We go, okay, what do I get for my originals? What are my books going to sell? What are my royalties going to be? What's the cost of this versus the cost of this? Can I actually afford to do that? I mean, the materials alone on Chivalry cost a fortune. And the way I was originally going to do it, it would have cost so much, it would have eaten up almost the entire page rate, because I was going to do it on a particular kind of parchment vellum that would have cost me nearly $200 a page. It's going to be anything left over to do the book. It's a particular kind of goat skin that is also coated, and when you make a mistake, you scrape it to wear it down, and it's very stable. It'll last longer than the pyramids, and it's also super expensive. So I can't afford to do that. But at the same time, there are risks. Like, what if you work on a book that's not popular and nobody wants the art? There's that happens. But also there's the satisfaction. I've been doing digital art for years, and it never feels real. It just doesn't feel the same. There's something about the synergy and the sensation of the tools. I can smell them, I feel them, they're on my hands, they're on my floor. They're very different experiences. It's completely different than working digitally. I don't think it sits in my memory as much because it's not tactile. There's nothing about the digital experience that's tactile. Everything about the original art experience is tactile and sensory. So I don't know. Maybe that's airy-fairy. I don't know.
Okay. Are there any particular, you mentioned wanting to hang on to some of the pages from Chivalry. Are there any particular favorites that jump out as this is one that I just couldn't let go?
The one with my mom as a young lady, the one with Mrs. Whitaker and the apple. That's my mother as a young woman, and it's spot on. It's exactly what she looked like. I couldn't. That's kind of makes me feel sad that someday. Well, I hope it goes to a nice place because it's my mom.
Yeah. So yeah, we've had some questions here about reference material among other things. So now, do you happen to have the teapot nearby that you painted, or?
You mean one?
Oh yes.
There it is. It's about 100. Yeah, it's about 100 years old. It's a Sadler blue willow. I don't think you can see it in the video, but it's got crackler in the glaze. I guess it's worth about $75. I've had it for a long time. I just love this teapot. I think it's the prettiest thing. And now you can get blue willow, modern blue willow. This is Johnson Brothers. This is, anybody can make blue willow. It's out of copyright and everything. So this is the cup. So I have a number of pieces of this, but the modern stuff is not very expensive. I just like the character of an old piece, this detail work, this fluting, these beautiful little scroll things. You notice how in the modern versions they streamline everything. It doesn't have the flourishes that the older material does. And I like this particular one because some of the other Sadler blue willow has gold on it, which I don't like. I think it's a step too far. I like the plainer, but it's just beautiful. It's fluted. It's very tactile. It feels great. Lovely little details in here. It's just a wonderful, fun thing to have. I love this pot. I also have a Sadler Brown Betty when Mrs. Whitaker is serving everyday tea with her friend. She uses Brown Betty. A Brown Betty is a really common English teapot for everyday use. And it's said to make the best tea. I don't know that it does, but I have a Brown Betty. I have about a half a dozen different teapots. I like teapot. So there's, and this is this is the tea strainer we used for the formal scene. This is modern, but it's nice. Yay.
So like this is the Antiques Roadshow portion of the conversation, which is fun. And do you use a lot of reference on a typical page? Do you use photographs, books, or do you have things around the whole time, or do you just dive in?
It depends. It depends. There were a lot of things that needed to be referenced very heavily, such as Mrs. Whitaker's kitchen, because Neil was very specific about the details of the house. For example, the story takes place in the 1980s, about 1989, but she would have lived in that house for a long time and probably had a lot of outdated things in the house. So I found a stove that was decades old and was able to use that for reference. And I've never seen stoves like that before, but there is a museum in the UK of war era lifestyles and stuff. So and whenever I'm in England or Ireland or wherever, I take a cajillion photographs. I mean, I just have thousands of them. So I would have a lot of this ephemera on file on my computer anyway. But so the tea kettle, the kitchen, the house, Mrs. Whitaker's house, is Neil's grandmother's house. That was really hard to reference when we couldn't get out during the pandemic. But and he couldn't remember the exact address, and I'll be darned, he could remember the town, and he was able to remember the street. And then I used a search to travel down that street, taking shots of the street as we went along until we found the house. So we were able to get a shot of the house. And then I found out that it had been sold. So we found these real estate listings with these horrific photographs. Oh my God. The interior was just a nightmare. Had a great big beanbag chair, and they painted the fireplace black, and it's the worst. But I was able to get a look at the inside of the house. So so we had that. The town, I was able to go right into the town and look around this place and get the butcher shop and the post office and everything. They're all out there. And had to draw from that kind of reference, find places online and whatnot. It's actually kind of a pain in the butt. My original intention was to fly out there and get everything I needed. And instead I'm working from, fuzzy snapshots. It was awful. But for the figures, I didn't use as much reference. Now I did use my mom in a couple of shots, but Galahad doesn't exist. Galahad's completely out of my head. I hate to break it to you girls, but or guys, well, whatever. But he's out of my imagination. I know exactly what he looks like. I know I've been, no problem drawing him off the top of my head. So the portraits and everything of him, there was no reference there, which is, it's a little tricky getting realism out of your head. But the one of my mom, that's exactly from a photo. And Mrs. Whitaker doesn't look exactly like my mom. My mom is actually too youthful. My mom is older than Mrs. Whitaker, but she's weirdly youthful. She's slender, and she just looks great. She just looks really good. And she was too youthful and pretty for Mrs. Whitaker. I mean, Mrs. Whitaker is a nice old lady, but she needed to be of a certain body type and everything. So I used her as a model, but not entirely. But young Mrs. Whitaker is my mom, spot on. And in some shots, I did use some figure reference, but most of the time I draw it in my head. I don't like using too much figure reference because I think it makes the work look stiff. Could be my bias, but the Tracy thing that a lot of people do, I think it just deadens the work. I think you need a little squash and stretch and exaggeration in the figure. And real human proportions tend to look weird, flattened into a two-dimensional space as a drawing. It just looks very dead. So I stretched them out a little bit, exaggerated a little bit. And I did use references from pre-Raphaelite paintings as kind of in jokes throughout the book. There's a lot of Easter eggs in the book, especially visual Easter eggs. When Sir Galahad first sees the Holy Grail and he kneels, that figure is from Sir Edward Burne-Jones's Pygmalion and Galatia series. And there's a line in that series, that shot, that's exactly the right shot. That figure is from a Sir Edward Coley Burne-Jones painting. And there's a line in the series of paintings called "The Hand Refrains, the Soul Attains." So I thought that was a perfect kind of reference. I mean, he's thinking about a girl in the Galatia paintings, but I thought that was a great Easter egg kind of visual that nobody got. There's another Easter egg where Galahad is on the horse with a couple of children. And that's from a Sir John Everett Millais painting called A Dream of the Past, Saint Isumbrus at the Ford. And it was reviled when that painting was first released. The critics hated it. But I've always thought the theme of the painting, the backstory of it, and putting it into Chivalry makes a great Easter egg, especially if you know the backstory of that particular painting. If you don't know, you've got a nice picture of a guy on a horse. But if you do know, it's a fun Easter egg for Raphaelite lovers. So there's little moments like that throughout the book. The Bayeux Tapestry is in there. I'm surprised because almost no one has mentioned it, but the Bayeux Tapestry is in there, and I changed it because of course it's considered by many to be the first real Western comic strip. It's like this 40-foot long tapestry comic strip, and I thought that would be a scream. So it's in the background of one shot, and the line "the once and future king" is written in Latin there. And of course there's a double joke there because Norman invasion is the defeat of this. Okay, talk about King Arthur trivia. People confuse King Arthur with, oh boy, how do I put this? King Arthur's not English. King Arthur is a Briton. The English were Anglo-Saxon invaders that King Arthur was probably resisting sometime in the 4th century. So the English that we think of now as being English did not exist in King Arthur's day. That came later. And then the Anglo-Saxons were defeated by the Normans, the Norman invasion. So it's a history joke that King Arthur, who resisted the English, is on this bayou tapestry, which is a joke about the Norman invasion defeating the Angles. Obscure references, and of course, the Britons are actually related to the Britons of Brittany, which is northern France, and it was the French who actually jump-started a lot of what we know about the Arthurian legend. And it was Eleanor of Aquitaine's daughter, Marie of France, who actually financed some of that material that we come to know as being seminal to the King Arthur legend today. So there's your obscure Easter egg visual reference in Chivalry that absolutely no one got, but now you know.
That's great. I love that. Yeah, they're about, it's probably about 2,000 pages of supplemental reading if you really want to fully appreciate this. And
I've started writing about them. I put some of them on my Tumblr. I put a couple of them on my Tumblr, and people don't know I'm the actual artist. And somebody wrote me and said I was overthinking it. I said, no, I'm the actual person who did it. And they're like, oh, okay. It was very funny. But yeah, I thought every detail of this freaking book, upstairs and downstairs, there is nothing in there by accident.
I love it. Yeah, I'm gonna have to hit you up for a reading list, and yeah, it's but yeah, I you know, I've seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail about 100 times. I've read King Arthur stories since earlier than
Who
that.
are the Briton?
Yeah. my mom's a retired high school English teacher, and she would show that in class too, as part of the, you know, bringing classic literature to life. But yeah, I'm looking forward to going through and taking yet another look at the book, and then trying to spot the details. And like I said, it's on display at the Cartoon Art Museum for another week and a half until September 18th. So I hope people will make it there to check it out.
I didn't realize how late it was. I talked too much. I'm sorry.
No.
Sorry.
If you have, yeah, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to get in. I'm getting the wrap it up signal from our technical crew here. But this is a lot of fun.
I'm sorry. I hope I didn't. Oh, I know a lot of people wanted to know about gold leaf and everything. I actually used a couple of things, but if you want to get this great kit, this is a gold leafing project kit. You can buy this, and it gives you all the instructions for how to use gold leaf. I ended up not using gold leaf in the book because I don't like the way it prints. Instead, I use Spectralite. Oh, that's the wrong one. Oh, I use this, and you can tell I used it a lot. This is Spectralite. It's not really gold ink. It's liquid acrylic, but it's 18 karat gold liquid acrylic. Is that 18 karat? I can't read it. Yes, it is 18 karat gold. This is powdered gold in here, and you can draw and paint with this stuff. And I find that the granular quality of this stuff, because it's all powdered, right? It catches the light differently and scans better for my purposes. So I know a lot of people wanted to know about this stuff. There it is. So gold leaf is great for original art, it scans awful. There are tricks to get it to print well, but I don't like it. Forget it. Just use this stuff. Yeah. Okay. There. Okay, I got that out of there. Here's my pen. I use my pen. Are we done?
Yeah, we're just about done. Gary Amaro in the chat, another Sandman alumnus, says hello. He's been enjoying this.
Oh, great.
Another very, very talented illustrator. So I hope he got some useful tips on the
Oh my goodness.
gold
I'm only
leaf.
just now seeing the chat. Oh, I didn't realize it was up. Oh, where am I based? I'm in the Appalachian Mountains. There's an LOL. Hi, LOL. I don't see the cam logo. I see the logo, just speakers. Wait a minute. That's a long time ago. Hi, Colleen. Okay, let me scroll down. This was fantastic. Oh, you're welcome. Blah, blah. Time to wrap it up. Ah, shut up.
Someone asked about your
Let's
necklace
see.
and was interested in a.
Oh, my necklace. Oh, you have got to go on eBay. Okay, go on eBay. Look up this artist. She used to be really popular in the 80s. You can get these for a song sometime, probably not now that I mentioned it. Maya Evangelista. Semi-precious stones and resin. I love her necklaces. I've got several. This is another one. How fabulous is this gorgeous thing? Look at this. And she also makes the most amazing resin handbags. If you're lucky, you can get these when nobody else is watching and you won't pay that much. So yay. Is that a crown on a book in the background? I don't know. Is that a crown on a book in the background? I'm not sure what that is. I have no idea. Colleen was also the inspiration for one of Sandman's best characters. Thessaly. Just because it's a running joke about how plain I look without my makeup. I kid you not. It's funny. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, okay. I can't say that. Propaganda Army of the State Department. Okay. All right. La, 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 la. I think I've looked at everything. What did she think of Camelot 3000? Not to my taste, but I love the art. Am I finished? Did we go through everything? How are you feeling these days? You sound good today. Great. Yesterday I was terrible, wasn't I, when you did the preview? Oh, I was so, not a good day. Okay, I'm sorry. We've gone over. Sorry.
Okay. Okay, to your left on the table. So there's something brown with gold leaf on it, kind of.
Oh, this is just a folder.
Okay.
I love getting, isn't this pretty? I love getting these fancy folders. I like having, who wants crappy old manila? I want pretty stuff. I even have, oh, look at this. This is my favorite. It's my color coordinated Levenger notebook with a color coordinated pen. How girly is that? It's pink. I love it.
Great. That folder from our vantage point, actually, it looks like this leather bound gold leaf embossed album or something. So I think that was a good question. Judy Malloy in the audience was asking about that. So
got a distant soil in it. It's got a distant soil in it. I have all these drawers over here. I keep I love having Levenger notebooks because I can, I don't have it here. Levenger notebooks because I can put my layouts and stuff into binders. It's really, are they over here? Yeah, over here. See a distant soil binder. Watch me tear up my studio. I can put my layouts and things directly in there and put holes in them, and then I don't lose everything. It's pretty neat, huh? I love Levenger. Okay.
Well, it's about time to wrap up, but thank you to our amazing panelists, and thank you for the humongous show and tell and work into your process, Colleen. It's been an honor.
Okay.
All right, thank you to Gladys for running tech tonight. Yeah, so again, one more time, her artwork, Chivalry, is on display at the museum until September 18th, so please check it out. She did mention her Patreon page, so a quick little online search, you should be able to find that. But thanks so much. I had a blast. I know from our chat, it looks like the audience had a fun time too. I could do this all night, but we won't put you through that. But thanks so much. We appreciate it. And yeah, thanks everybody for watching. Hope you all have a great night and stay tuned.